Welcome to Because We Love You, a podcast dedicated to helping you live a life of wellness. My name is Stacy, and this is my co-host, Jade.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new year of Because We Love You. In our first episode, we're so excited to talk about how to make the change. So stay tuned, listen up, and as always, if we have information that you like, check us out with our show notes.
And follow us on Instagram or Facebook, and you can listen on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or YouTube.
Happy New Year! It
Yes.
is 2022, and we are so excited to be here and starting all the new topics of 2022.
That's right. Happy New Year. So exciting.
Fresh starts feel so good, right?
Yes.
So, I'm, Stacy, we know this. I've already New Year's Eve. We had to do a time capsule with all the things we want to do in 2022 because we need some accountability, right?
Yes. Jade is very serious about always having some goals for each year. So
I love them. And so sometimes it is depressing because we don't always meet all of them, but usually every year we meet some of them. But Stacy, I want to hear, what are some of your 2022 goals?
Sure. Okay. So I have a few things. One, I want to run a half marathon. So
Great. I love it.
Working towards that.
I'm helping her a lot. I'm sending her the download
Delivery.
app saying you need to sign up. You need to sign up.
That's right. I want to read at least 24 books. So
Great.
about every other week. This is kind of part of another goal to cut down on screen time before bedtime. So I just want to,
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Would listening to the book count as a read?
Okay. So to be clear, I am not judging people who listen to books, and I think that totally counts. But for me, I want to touch it. I want to hold it and turn the pages and smell the pages.
I hear you. I'm all about touch too. I say this though. I even asked the question because we were recently reading a book or thinking about reading a book together, and she slyly was like, "Did you buy the book, like the actual book, or are you just listening to it?" And I was like,
Okay,
what? It doesn't count if I listen to the book. I need to touch the book
say it
with
in that tone.
No, I kind of added the tone, but
I was just wondering.
I didn't know that she had some personal feels about. It is very important for her to touch the book. And I'm going to touch some books with her this year. I don't know if I'm touching 24 books with her this year, but my goal is at least 12.
Okay.
One of them up.
I love it. Okay, great. So we'll touch a lot of books. That's our goal. And then I want to do something for Because We Love You, something to take the next step. And specifically, there's a conference we've had in mind that we want to go to in California with Bob Goff, who we love so much.
Yes,
So
I like it.
what about you?
So I've been thinking more about this lately in the last few weeks, but I think mine boils down to like a word, like what I want everything to kind of go around. And I just want to be uncomfortable this year. And I know that like when I say things, we said one year that we wanted to be spent.
Yes.
And we were like,
And that was the hardest year
that
of
was
our lives.
so hard. It was
Yeah.
it was really hard, but I want to be uncomfortable and I want to push myself to do bigger things. I want to perhaps go to the desert and go up in a hot air balloon and experience that. I want to go to some leaders who I think are amazing and their speaking abilities, like Erwin McManus. I want to go to his church. I want to experience that.
Yeah.
I really, really, really want to start on writing a book about the things that we're learning through this process and help people. And that is very intimidating. And Because We Love You, I really want to buy a building. I want to buy a building so that we can come together and meet you fine folks out there and grow in life together. So I think that in all those things, I might be uncomfortable.
I think so. And I'm excited for you, also nervous for myself, because I know if you want to be uncomfortable this year, that means I'm going to be uncomfortable too.
Exactly.
But we'll grow. We'll grow together.
Yes. But I think that when we think about the new year, we think about making changes like that and setting goals. And sometimes we feel like, oh, it's just a day on the calendar. I hear negative things like nothing's really going to change.
Yeah, we're the same person. Why now?
But I think that research, when we've been doing research on this and reading books, we have found that research supports that now is the time to change.
Yeah, that's right. Anytime there's some kind of temporal landmark. So I know this is something in a book that you've been reading recently or listening to.
Yes. Real Fast is a great book. This book has really inspired us for this talk and this personal application. And it's Katie Miltman, and she is a behavioral scientist, and she wrote the book How to Change. So how appropriate, how to change. And, sometimes you see those titles and you're just like, oh my goodness, they're going to tell me it's about more willpower. It's about more thinking. It's about just doing it. Take the action. But no, she uses an engineer mindset of how do we combat the barriers of change. So I'm really excited, and all that we're talking about today kind of comes out of her research. So I encourage you to check it out. Look at our show notes. We'll have the link there. But yeah, Stacy, tell us more about these temporal landmarks that she talks about.
It's interesting because she talks about these times that mark a new stage. And so New Year's is a perfect example, but I think there are other ones too, like birthdays, especially big birthdays. I know when people turn like 30 or 40 or 50, that feels like a time like, okay, now I want to start doing this thing, or now I have this new goal. Beginning of the month, she talks about an interesting study where they were looking at changing behaviors in college students. And essentially for behavior change, they just marked two different times. They said either, okay, you're going to start on March 20th, which is just a totally random date, right? Or on the first day of spring, and just labeling it as this new landmark for a new time, a new season was effective. It was the same day, right? Which is crazy, but just calling it something new. So it turns out that maybe having a new year can actually be helpful.
Yes, I think so. I think that even Because We Love You came out of a moment of a temporal landmark. When we think back about this, we were at I was a place of physical pain, and I had this life-changing moment at 35 years old that I was having major surgery, and things that I took for granted, like picking up my children and swinging them around, wasn't happening anymore. And I was just kind of going through life. And I know that you were going through some, not physical pain, but some emotional pain.
Yeah, we went through major trauma loss through foster care. And, we also did all of this in the middle of a global pandemic. And so it was a hard time. We're typically together a lot. We were isolated. We were going through these hard things and, of course, supporting each other. But, it was a time of pain and trauma for both of us. And the end of that started with Because We Love You.
Yeah, it was almost like we kind of got desperate. We're like, if we can't change any of these things, but we can change our future and this. And this was something that we had wanted to do for a long time. We had just been too nervous and scared and maybe lazy. Who knows? All of those things to do this. And so I believe that that was a temporal landmark. So I think that what we can apply is that when bad things happen, when failure happens, when pain happens, when death, when trauma, when Sunday night comes and you haven't made any of those changes, Monday morning comes. There is joy. There can be joy after sorrow. And sorrow lasts for a night, but joy comes in the morning. That's what I was thinking. And I always love that. My mom has it crocheted in her bathroom. So sometimes I'll just go use the bathroom in her room because I just love it. And just to read that when I'm sad, I'm like, no, sorrow lasts for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And this is part of that joy. So use that if you're at a moment where these you're like, I'm here, and make that change. Use that to spur the change.
Yeah. The interesting thing too was that she talked about how though, if you're on a roll, if you're doing well, right, keep going. It's not a time to start over. It's not a time to add a new goal. Just keep doing what you're doing. So some of you, have been meeting your goals from last year and are on a weight loss journey or an exercise journey or saving money, paying off your house, whatever it may be.
No fresh start for you.
Yes.
Do not start over.
Keep doing it because, those restarts can be, she talks about disruptive when we're on a roll.
Yeah. She used an example with Major League Baseball, which my husband loves that I know anything about baseball. And so this gave me a talking trick with him. And I was like, when baseball players are on a streak and they're doing phenomenal, you don't trade them. You don't sell them off. You don't think that will transpose. And she gave time after time, but one specific example was Jared Saltalamacchia, and where his first season at the Atlanta Braves, he was doing amazingly well with his batting average and all of his stats. But they traded him to the Texas Rangers. I think he will be very excited if that is right. And when he did that, he had to start over. Everything disappeared. All of his stats disappeared. And when that happened, he never got up to that first role of where he was doing phenomenal. So this is just an example of when you're in that, don't change the momentum. The momentum is there for you. No fresh start.
No fresh start. But for the rest of us who are on to a fresh start in the new year, what do you think about the types of goals that we set? Like, how do we decide what goals to set and what behaviors we want to change? Where do those come from?
I think, as always, it's so important to know, like, about your brain. You know, like how our brain is what puts all of this in action. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's two parts of the brain that are involved in goal setting and change that we've talked about before. And one is the amygdala and our flight, fight, fear, freeze, all of those things. Yeah, but it's also controls our emotion and how things really, what they mean to us. Yeah. And then also our frontal lobe, which is more about our cognitive thinking and how we do it and what we do and what is required to make the change, like the action to our change.
Yeah, planning, decision making.
Yeah, and those things have to work together to create a change. Yeah. And so we have to figure out how do those two areas work together. And Stacy, I know that you actually did some reading with Angela Duckworth and her research on this. So like, what did you find out when you put those two parts with goal setting together?
Yeah. So if we think about what we just talked about it in terms of what the two areas do, then it seems that the amygdala would be more important for us deciding if a goal is important. Right? And then the frontal lobe would be more important for planning out those steps, right? And so with that first part, kind of thinking about the amygdala and thinking about, okay, is this goal important? Angela Duckworth, who you may have heard of, she has a pretty famous TED Talk now in a popular book on grit. That's kind of what she's famous for right now. But she has talked about this idea of hierarchy of goals. And it's this idea that, you know, we may have small level goals and mid-level goals, but everything should be tied to a high level goal, something big, right? And I think that's interesting because when we set a goal, we often think like we can never change that goal. We have to stick to it. But essentially, when you think about that, that's only true with your high-level goal, your big goal. So when you think about a lot of the little behaviors that we're changing that feel like big things, of course, but let's say, like, I want to commit to running or I want to commit to losing weight and eating healthy, right? These may be like mid-level goals to a high-level goal of just working on your overall health. Like, I want to be healthy, right? And so I think it's important when we think about those goals that they need to be big. They need to be also tied to our core values, because if those goals are not important to us, like if we say, I'm going to get healthy, but we actually really don't care about that yet, then what's the point of setting that goal, right? Like it has to be important to you, something that you really value. You know, when I think about a lot of the goals that I have, a lot of them are set to or related to loving people, right? So what's your highest level goal? And you have to think about how all of then your mid-level and small level goals kind of tie into that.
I love that because it seems so much more obtainable than setting 16 different goals, but it's also intimidating. And I think for a lot of people, they're like, you know, when I ask, like, what is even your New Year's resolution? What is one goal? They struggle with that. But to find the big overall theme of your life, I mean, that takes time. So, you know, when you're sitting out there thinking, whoa, I don't know what that is. I mean, that takes time, investment, maybe some tests, some disc assessments, some counseling, to really dial into that. What is my overall goal? What I love about that, though, is our goals are personal. They have to be personal to us. I was talking with my husband about this, and I was like, it's so interesting because you lead this team of people. I said, Jason, I know you're a big goal setter and you have these goals, but perhaps in the new year, you need to think about It's not about the goals I want to set for them. It's about their personal goals.
Yeah.
I was like, so perhaps when you have your first meeting, you need to get them to goal set for their ministry, for their thing. And then you adapt a bigger goal to support that goal. And how could that change? Because it has to be it has to mean something to you for it to work, because if not, your amygdala is not going to respond.
That's right.
And if your amygdala is not talking, your frontal lobe is not going to make the appropriate steps to make this happen, and you will not change. So
I think if you're feeling stuck, it's helpful just to think about what do you care about? What's important to you? What are you spending your time doing, or what do you want to spend your time doing? And that might lead you to that high level goal.
I also love that it has to be big. It needs to be big. Research after research shows that when things are small, we don't value them as much. We're like, we could obtain that easily. Yeah. We could do that easily. And we don't make any big changes or big structures to keep us accountable, because we're like, we know we can do that. So when you make those big goals, you're 90% more likely to make a change, to make a big change.
That's right. There was an interesting study. It's kind of an older study now, but that came out of the Journal of Applied Psychology, and they did a study on energy consumption. And it was interesting because people who set more challenging goals made a more significant change, like you said. And so, if it's an easy goal, easy for you to reach, doesn't take much effort, or you don't really care about it, probably you're not going to change your behavior.
And that's why we're writing a book this year, Stacy.
That's right.
That's a big challenge. Goal. And I'm not going to say it's going to be finished, but we are starting the chapters. We're going to have some chapters to read because it's big. So I think for me personally, it's a little bit easier to know what I want. Like my amygdala is fully functional. I have all of the desires. Yes. I know what I want. I know what I feel. But sometimes it's that frontal lobe of doing it that gets me every time.
Yeah, figuring out the steps and then doing them. Sticking to it.
So that's what I loved about this book, How to Change by Katie Miltman, because it was less about just do it. Yeah. And it was more about what are the things that we can do to identify the barriers. And some of the barriers can be impulsivity. I want what I want when I want it and now. Yes. Procrastination. I can wait to do that for many days. Yep. Laziness, like no, I don't want to do that right now. I just, maybe I do want to do it, but it's too hard, whatnot, and confidence. And so she identifies some of those things that are barriers to change, but she gives loads of little tips to combat those. And I want to talk about those today. I know we both read through them, and they were so, I think they've developed, over the week and even with our kids, we've already started talking so much about how we can change and how we can see more change through these little tips and tricks.
That's right.
Which one did you love the most?
Okay. The one I love the most and the one that I use most often is what she calls temptation bundling, which is if your goal involves some things that you are not super excited about, which usually they do, right? They're things that are hard or take a lot of effort or are not natural. Yeah. You bundle it with something else you really enjoy or love or that you take pleasure in. And so I do that a lot. So I'll give you 2 examples related to exercise. But first, I used to hate going to the gym, right? And just like trying to go on the elliptical for an hour or run on the treadmill or whatever it may be is just so boring. But now what I do is I pick one trashy Netflix show that I want to binge, and it's my gym show, and I can only watch it at the gym. So now, once I get into a show, I have to be careful what I pick because I have to be able to get into it.
And it's limitless for trashy
That's
Netflix
right.
shows. So you will be exercising
forever. Yes. So I pick a show and I can only watch it at the gym. And so it makes sure that I get there several days because I want to know what happens on the next episode. So I take something that I wouldn't necessarily be excited to do, and I pair it with an activity that's exciting and gets me there.
So you've always said this, and I'm like, I can get behind this. But there's been one small barrier for my whole life, and it was all earbuds make my ears hurt. I've never been able to find anything, and I don't want to wear those big headsets at the gym or like working. Well, my husband helped me out, and he got me a head wrap that has the earphones in there, so I can wear it. And I hadn't even told you about it yet. Yeah, but that's exciting. And it's weird that that's been a barrier, but I can't even like listen to. I have to like hold my phone up to my ear. Yeah. Like on speaker mode, just to like listen to something while I walk, because I mean they kill my ears. I don't know. I have a deformed ear canal. now. It just does not fit the regulation size. I need a bigger size or something.
There you go.
But anyway, so I plan on getting bored with this temptation bundling with working out and being more healthy, because now I have the state of the art headband. It's going to be in the winter, I look cool. In the summer, I do not know how this is going to work out, but
we'll see.
I like that. But another thing that with exercise with us, I think, is when we try to walk once a week together.
Yeah.
To me, that adds the pleasure of conversation with a little bit of exercise. So it motivates me to say, hey, I do want to exercise.
Yeah.
What was your other one? What do you...
Oh, so this one, I can't believe I'm talking about this. My husband always makes fun of me, but I have my special running playlist that motivates me. And I think a lot of people do that, right? But the funny thing is that what I love to listen to while I'm running is sexy country.
Yes, and I've partaked of this with you.
And he's always like, it's so slow.
Like it.
And like, how are you even motivated with that? But I love it. I love country music and things that just make me happy and feel good and want to feel sexy, right?
Yeah, I was thinking it has to do with something of like, if I'm running, then I'm going to be that sexy country
That's right.
girl in that video that I'm picturing right now in my head. I love it.
Yes.
One temptation bundle that I've seen over the last really year is we've started paying for our house to get cleaned every other week, and so to do that, it's very weird, but you actually have to clean before the clean.
Yeah, pick up.
I know. Yeah. You have to pick up everything and put it in its rightful place, because all they do is clean. They don't pick up your mess.
Yep.
And so me and my husband have called it the great cleanup. And so instead of it being like this miserable time, and at first it was the great cleanup, and it was like, oh, but we've tried to create this party around the great cleanup. Like, tonight's the great cleanup.
Yeah.
Let's dance. Let's be crazy. Let's put everything where they need to go. And so it's kind of like, it's a moment where we don't really enjoy it. And it's on a Thursday night, and we're like, but when we do it, we feel better about our house, and it's like a fun thing, and we're having a party, and we're high-fiving, and everybody's doing it together. And you know how, like, when people do it together, right?
Yes,
You know,
it's like a
everything's
challenge.
better together, you know, just high-fiving. So it's, you know, it's something that it's a change that we're making, and we're providing great pleasure with it. We have made it fun.
That's awesome.
So I think this is a great thing that people can learn. Take that habit that you don't really like and make it fun. Yeah. Stacy, even before you said that, like, you eat candy grating papers. And
yes,
so,
during
like,
grading season,
always not the greatest for your half marathon you're running there, Missy. But yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, it makes it fun. Keeps me motivated.
I'm glad it's only twice a year.
Yes.
I can get behind that.
Bad idea if it's every day. What about you? What was your favorite?
I can't say that it was my favorite, but I did like this tip, and it was set default settings. And so, you know, we're looking at something like with this tip, we're looking at something that maybe like laziness, like, you know, you want to do something good. You want to give more. You want to save, but yet you're just a little lazy. You want to give to the children around the world and whatnot, but you just haven't set in motion the plan to, or can't remember to give. And so for that, you can set default settings. I think the world has kind of helped us with this because of great scientists and research that knows that, like, people want to save. People really do want to put into 401ks. Yeah. But sometimes we need something that we have hands off, that we've set before, the default is on, that we do nothing about, that we get the reminder for. And I love her research on this, is that there was a company that you had to opt in to saving for their 401k. And there was not a very high percentage of people who were actually putting into their 401k. But when they interviewed them, they're like, yeah, savings important. My future is important. All of these things. And then when they had an when they flipped the switch and you had to opt out if you didn't want to save, people there in one day, it went up by 40% the amount of people that were actually saving in their 401k.
That's interesting.
Amazing.
That's amazing. I've seen it connects nicely to the research on organ donation. I've heard that same thing before, that in the U.S., you know, when you get your license, you have to opt in to be an organ donor. But in many places around the world, it's an opt out. So if you don't want to be an organ donor, you have to kind of request, I want to sign this paper.
Needs to change. We could save so many lives by people being lazy.
Yes.
People are lazy. They just don't want to do the thing. But if you make if you make them have to be not lazy to do the wrong thing, then it's great.
Yep.
It's
Make
awesome.
the default the healthy, good, right thing. Yeah.
And I even think about that is, like, how do we apply that? How do I apply that to my own life? And I think that, one thing is I've always wanted to be better about my devotions and my spending time with God and like positive things. And I love that YouVersion has created a default for me. Like I can sign up for a plan. I can set a reminder, and it will send me a reminder every day at the same time, like, Jade, your plan is ready for you to read today. Yeah. Or it'll send the verse of the day. And I think that's been such a great default setting in my life. It's not that I don't want to read or do a devotional. It's just that I'm lazy, or I forgot, or things are getting ahead of me. So what's the default setting in your life?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I would say I have some at work, because one thing she talked about was combining a default setting with a no matter what clause. And so I've started doing that at work to make sure I stay productive research wise. And so, for example, a no matter what clause would be, okay, you have this default setting, where that's just what you do. You don't have to think about it. And so building in things like, like I have a writing time, like I have to do this at this time. And so then it's just a pattern, right? I don't have to think about it. It's just what I do. But sometimes things come up, right? Students stop by my office, or a meeting pops up, and it throws off even my default, right? Because sometimes that could happen. And so the good thing about the no matter what clause is that I have to stick to that thing, or I have to do that thing, even if it doesn't happen with the default, right? Which hopefully every day, the default is built because it does it automatically. But sometimes in situations like that, it gets thrown off. And so for me, it's like, okay, I have to write at least one page before I leave. And if that doesn't happen at my default time, I make sure that I just have to stay at work until it gets done. Yeah. So
I like that. I think that we can even create that with our kids sometimes, that, maybe we don't do all the homework, but we say, no matter what, you're going to read. We know how important reading is for our children. And I've not been the best about any of that default, but I have started saying, okay, yeah, you can maybe not practice your piano tonight. You can maybe not do this, but you are going to read. Yeah. I don't care how busy we are. The reading is going to take precedence. And even at work sometimes, because work is so crazy and there's so many things to do, it's almost like it can be a daily thing. Like you don't have to, you can just say, by the end of the day, no matter what, I've got to get this done. I will not leave until I get this portion done. So, but just setting that stone in your mind and saying, yep, I'm going to make sure this happens.
Yeah. I do that with gym time too. So, I always run on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, but sometimes if something pops up and I can't do it, I have a no matter what, that if I didn't get it in the morning, I have to run in the evening. And so it makes me stick to it, which is good.
I like it. One other thing that I really liked was her commitment device. She says, so one barrier to change is that you can actually create these commitment devices in your life. Yeah. And I think it was the story that I loved the most was this author, Victor Hugo. Mm-hmm. And when he was writing The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and this clearly illustrates what a commitment device is. And he had a deadline for his book, and he was like, it was a strict deadline. This has to be in. And he was so pressured, and he didn't think he could do it. So he locked up all of his clothes. yes, except a shawl. Uh-huh. And I mean, like, I'm sure he wore underwear too, but I'm sorry, I'm visually imaging this. Yeah. And like, they didn't have a lot of heat and stuff during this time, right? So, probably he was cold. Commitment. He wanted to write this book, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I want to read it now. I don't really think I've ever, it's in a movie.
It's been a long time.
But I don't know that I've ever truly partaked of it. But now I will read the book.
That could be one of the books you touch this year.
Yeah, I will touch this book, but I can't wait to read it and think about this author just sitting there naked, with a shawl. He had to write this book this way. But anyways, he locked up all of his clothes. Yeah. And so that he would meet the deadline. And he was like, I cannot and I will not put on these clothes before this book is done. That's amazing. And he met his goal. Yeah. And this leads me to another question, Stacy Lipowski. So we're writing a book this year. And I couldn't help but to think, maybe if I feel like you're slacking and you're not meeting my deadlines,
You're going to take all my clothes.
I'm going to take your clothes and I'm going to leave you naked in your home until you write the first chapter, until you meet my deadlines. No,
I feel like this could be motivating for me, but you might like it a little too much. I don't think having to be naked would be a problem for you.
Maybe not, but I don't know. But it was such a good this can be in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be that. It could be a commitment to a boss, or I'm gonna get that done. Like no matter what, I'm gonna make sure that happens. It could be cash commitment. I've seen a lot of apps with this idea where if you don't meet the goals, you've got to pay money.
Yeah, we know people who did that with weight loss this year, where they had a weight loss goal, and if they met it, they could win so much money. But if they didn't, they had to pay. So yeah, that could be a good commitment device.
It is effective. Who wants to pay to like fill out a goal?
Yeah.
I like one that I've been thinking about, and I tell patients this, is eating on small plates. So replacing your big plates, committing to a small plate.
Yeah.
And so when you say, I'm committing to only filling up this small plate once, it actually helps you. So you can still eat some of the same foods, but you're saying, I'm not going to go for seconds.
Yeah.
I'm committing to being done. I'm going to pop a mint at the end of this meal to change my taste buds so that I'm not as hungry. So these are all
good
commitment devices. So you can start thinking about how we can place these in our things. So maybe you'll be naked this year to write that book.
Spend more time naked. The last one that I liked was peer support. I just think that's so important, as we've talked about community and people and things so much. But, it's interesting to think about this in two ways. One, of course, it increases accountability, right? When you have a running buddy, a workout buddy, when sometimes writing groups, that's a popular thing, right? To get together and write together, even if you sit quietly. Pairing with your spouse or your significant other to save money is a good one. So knowing that you have peer support keeps you accountable, because if you don't do it, you're letting someone else down.
Yeah.
But I think the more, I think it's a little more important is just having a role model or seeing in others what you can achieve, right? Like knowing the goal that you have is possible. So running with someone who's done a half marathon before would be helpful for me to see, okay, it's possible. I can do it. I can stick to this goal. That could be really important and really helpful. So
I love that. I love that piece, because obviously one of the reasons why we're doing this is we believe in people, we believe in community, and we believe in that support. Research shows time and time again that accountability is important. It's not everything. Yeah. You can still have a friend that's awesome and great and keeps you accountable, and you still not make the change. Yeah. But if we truly want to, and personally, if I truly want to make these changes, I've got to be searching out for those people that can just, a mentor that can help give me the confidence to go to that next step and realize this can be done, and I believe in you. And there's so many times in life that we will get rejected and things won't work out the same way. Yeah. But even this week, I had a patient, she's a 18-year-old. She's her whole life, she had dreamed to go to Carnegie Mellon. That was her whole, I've seen her since I've been practicing for 10 years. She was like one of my first patients. And whole life, that's all I've ever heard. And that's what she wanted. And that's what she wanted. And it makes me a little bit tear up, because I knew that was so strong in her life. And she's worked super hard. She's a valedictorian. She was all these things, and she only committed to them. She did early decision making for that school, and she didn't get in. And she was like very sad and very falling apart. But in that moment, I was able to use my story of not getting into a school that I wanted, and to show how that had shaped my life. And this is on a video call. And if I hadn't gone through that, or if she hadn't talked to me, but afterwards she's like, I'm expectant to the other schools, because she's going to get into plenty of schools. Like, right. I mean, she's going to go to she's going to Princeton, I think, or that's probably like who's going to accept her, Princeton, Carnegie Mellon, okay, whatever. So we think, but that was really hard for her, but she needed somebody in her life to say, I've been there. I've done that. I've gone through the rejection, but look where I am now.
Yeah.
I still met the end goal. And perhaps there was somebody I needed to meet to make this happen. There was there was some information, this position. I was like, you are being positioned for exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
So we need those people in our life. And if we're not opening up and telling our stories and being there for other people, then that confidence is going to be lacking, and that can be a barrier for change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so hard to be our own cheerleader. I mean, we can do that to some extent, but if you're just trying to do this on your own, it can be really hard. So yeah, absolutely. Find a buddy, find a role model.
So I absolutely loved all these tips, and I love that they have names, because I feel like now I can like call them out, like, oh, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. You're setting a default. You're doing that cash commitment. You're saying that I'm going to put this money where my mouth is.
That's right.
So I love that we have that, and I can't wait to see all the new changes we can make. And I think that you guys can make these changes too. So think about that one barrier that just has you, and how can you combat that? Or even decide to read the whole book, because I'm enjoying the whole book and all the research that has been done on this. So that's your goal this week.
Yeah.
Find the one thing.
What's your barrier, and what can you do about it?
Yeah.
And if you need commitment, just send us a message. Tell us what you're doing, what you're committing to this year, and how you're overcoming your barriers.
And
Why,
set
Jade?
a time capsule. We do this because we love you.